organizations and going out promoting pork and seeing some community-minded people and community events that are going on.
Sure. Yeah, you can come over to my house if you want and grill burgers.
There you go.
No, seriously, text me the next time.
I'll let you know.
I grilled burgers of all kinds over the many years. That's my resume for you, Greg.
Yeah.
And I have burned up a couple, but that's what I'm drinking.
Well, I think the Main Street effort here in downtown Fort Dodge that encompasses your facilities here. They're having their grillings on the square again this year.
Sure.
Chris and the folks down at the Growth Alliance, they have those dates. We have one date that we participate in. I think it's towards the end of July with the Messenger and Farm News. So we kind of partner with them as they bring their staff down and help kick that around. But so that's something to let the listeners know about, to look for the Main Street luncheons on the square.
I look forward to that. I wonder when, they used to call it Lunch in the Green and all kinds of things. The Lions Club was down there for a while.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to hear that the pork producers will be down there as well.
Right there by the gazebo.
Right by the gazebo.
Downtown there. So
yeah, well, we look forward to that.
Yeah, so it's probably an event that gets some people out that normally either eat in their workplace environments or go to restaurants. But I know that's just another one of those efforts. And I think, whatever is going on with the farmers markets and those type of things this year, look forward to bringing those community events back together.
Sure. We talked a little bit about trade with China. Who are other major trading partners in agriculture other than China? We talk China all the time.
Yeah, well, and that's because they're the big one.
They're the big dog.
And as I indicated early on in the first segment, is that the Chinese this past year purchased more soybeans from the United States. And what's also important is that they took receipt of the most soybeans. And especially with China, you may say, well, we're going to buy 1,000 bushels of soybeans, but if they only take 500 bushels, well, that huge purchase didn't really make that much difference.
Right.
But in this case, this past year, China took over 1 billion bushels of soybeans from the United States. Now, to put that in perspective to your listeners, is we grew a little bit more than 4 billion bushels this past year.
Mm-hmm.
So that means China purchased over 25% of everything that we grew for soybeans, and they took delivery of it. On corn, China had a record year of purchasing corn from the United States. However, the deliveries, they have not taken all those deliveries. Sometimes they cancel because prices change, and or as we've heard, and you asked about the Biden administration early on, it has to deal with transportation also.
Right.
If you have railroads that can transport things, if you have the locks and dams that can transport on barges down to the ports in New Orleans, if you have ports in the West Coast that can rail grain into those ports and then load ships that can go to China, for example, off the West Coast. That's the most economical.
There's one other thing that the Biden administration is looking at. They have to look at this. China is an aggressive player in the Pacific. They want everything that we have and more. They're willing to do practically anything to get it. They are acting as an adversary, as they really always have. It's a dangerous situation, and Trump didn't start it, by the way. But the lever that we have, of course, to change China's behavior is agricultural products. Now, I know they can go somewhere else and go to Brazil or Argentina or whatever, but sometimes I don't know how much pull we have in Washington, D.C., even though Vilsack's still out there, and even though we have a couple of aggressive Republican senators here. So what is your reaction to those possibilities? Well, my first reaction would be one of the longtime supporters, and you had them on your station and on your program for a number of years, Iowa Soybean Association, for example. Yes. Iowa Corn Growers Association, for example. Of course. We have organizations, not just here in Iowa, but nationally, as I mentioned, those two commodities, that have personal relationships overseas. And the CEO of
Iowa Soybean Association is Kirk Leeds,
Mhm.
formerly a state representative from Webster City. And Kirk has been with Iowa Soybean for nearly 30 years now. And he talks about the relationship. And yes, we heard a lot about this when Terry Branstad, our former governor, was the ambassador, and everybody listening knows all about this history. But Kirk Leeds would tell you that, you know, he's been to China nearly 30 times in his career with the Iowa Soybean Association. And countless other farmers, bless his soul, Dean Coleman, that we've talked about right up here from Humboldt.
Great guy.
I know. And another man that passed away from COVID back in late fall was Bill Shipley. And Bill Shipley was president of the Iowa Soybean Association, served for a lot of years. He actually went to China with me when we went for the ag delegation that Governor Reynolds took over there years ago. And when I talk about the relationships, yeah, politics is important, but the individual relationships of farmers that you've had on this station and you've spoke to on the radio for all the years of contacts that have gone to those countries, not just China, but, you know, we're talking South Korea and Canada and Mexico and Vietnam and
Mhm.
all those far-reaching areas. So those personal relationships do matter, because remember, it's not countries that export the products. It's farmers that grow the products and companies that export the products.
I understand that.
And so, of course, here in the United States, we have large agriculture companies that can handle the facilitate not just the logistics of moving products, but the credit and the finance. So that's a huge part of this. And yeah, we as farmers know that the checkoff dollars that we voluntarily or mandatorily take out of our check to help promote our own products overseas is something that's tremendously important. And part of that segue that I'd like to go into now, Mike, not only about these other countries that I'm mentioning that are key players, but it's about the diseases of animals around the world. And that's why the African swine fever that has occurred, ASF, that has occurred over in China, they've cleaned it up and they're modernizing their pork production system, but they continue to have some outbreaks. And so that's a great concern here in the United States. We are having the World Pork Expo in 1 month from today, actually 9th, 10th, and 11th of June. World Pork Expo is back in Des Moines. Close to 20,000 visitors. It is open to foreign countries, although it's somewhat limited because of the coronavirus with people and African swine fever of pigs that's still going on in some countries. So, as I mentioned, the animal health issues, recent studies just come out. Dermot Hayes at Iowa State has done this study with the National Pork Board, talking about the impact of African swine fever if it came to the United States. And we in the pork industry have been doing a lot with biosecurity aspects and eradication of any other types of diseases. And believe me, people now know in this country after the past year of what we've gone through with coronavirus, how much of an impact that could be, not just devastating to what has happened with human health, but how that same type of impact could happen as I'm talking about the pork industry. So we continue to have vigilance with African swine fever and know that if there was a case found in the United States, Dermot Hayes has just come out with the estimate that 50% of our price would be gone right now. So if we're selling a pig for $200 a head today, it would be down to $100 per head if we had to close our borders and not export any pork.
I understand that. I know that, but there's China especially is seen as an aggressor, you know, and that has to be. They want us out of the Pacific altogether. Maybe they want us out of the Philippines. I don't know, but they would like us out at least as far as Hawaii. It's a real thing that's been bubbling for a long time, bubbling under the surface for a long time. And I don't know nobody knows what's going to happen. But it's one of those things where Biden may have to look tough or something, you know. Trump did a lot of those things. All presidents want to look tough.
Well, we know that some of the tariffs that were put on during the trade discussions, some of those tariffs did have an impact on getting some resolve. Now, tariffs, those are just extra taxes that somebody had to pay for.
Sure.
Okay, that's what it did. And yes, it created an income stream to the American political system and the American economy. Okay, we understand that. But still, most farm organizations, most farmers believe in free and fair open trade. And
I do.
yeah,
I'm not, it's just that, as you know, years ago, a farmer said that the United States wants to control the world's food supply, and that food, and I've talked about with Bill Horn and even you,
yeah.
and many, many farmers over the years, that food can be a terrible weapon. China is particularly afraid because they have a history of mass starvation.
Yes.
They're particularly afraid of having a hungry population, because a hungry population will revolt.
Yeah.
And their hold on power is pretty tenuous anyway.
Well, and if we look here in the United States, and your listeners have heard me say over the years that, worldwide, United States consumer has the most disposable income to spend on food because we have the least cost food in the world as a consumer. Mm-hmm. And you go to the grocery store, and I'm just talking about food products, not all your other paper products or non-food products. Those costs, we all understand what happens with that. But we continue to be a leader in food safety and food quality and nutrition with that. And mm-hmm. So, and that's what we continue to have organizations work on domestically for that food security aspect. Under this pandemic, this past year, agriculture organizations from California, where you have fruits and vegetables, trees, nuts, root crops, to your Midwest products, to go to the southeast part of the country where they raise different types of food products. We continue to provide to food pantries and food organizations more products that we participate in donations of, not just the raw products, but dollars towards those efforts to help those that are food insecure. Mm-hmm. And that's an important part that we did with this pandemic, mm-hmm. and we continue to do that with school lunch programs. And that's something that is a real concern, that we take care of our people as best we can, especially with the dollars coming from Washington, D.C. that help with those food items.
All right. This is AM 1400 KVFT, the voice of Fort Dodge. Our guest, Greg Hora, with the Webster County pork producers. The pork producers, unfortunately, I feel very strongly about this, and I'm totally in support of pork producers. Pork producers are still in the sights of animal rights activists. There were some laws proposed here in Iowa and in other places to protect pork producers from being attacked, really, by these people from out of state, don't understand our lives, culture. They don't even understand the world's food supply. All they know is they're trying to save pigs.
Yes.
And I'm trying to save them too until they're about $2.50. But is the pork producer involved in any of that legislation to protect pork producing facilities?
Absolutely, yes. And how you phrase that up, and from a human perspective, we look at cats and dogs as companion animals. Mm-hmm. And I learned that 30 years ago when I worked at the Fort Dodge Animal Health. And people around Fort Dodge know that currently Elanco owns the labs. You can still call it the labs. Mm-hmm. That's what it was for a lot of years. And it's had a lot of different owners over the last 35 years that I've been in Fort Dodge. But the point is that your question about animal rights and animal activism. And we in the pork industry know that we continue to up our game on the way we handle pigs. I just went through on my own farm 2 weeks ago today a 5-hour audit, and it's called a common swine industry audit. And looking at my records and my documentation, my training of that I take with Pork Quality Assurance Plus, Trucker Quality Assurance, biosecurity aspects of our farm, what we do with our load-out crews, our power washing crews, our repairs in the buildings, all these aspects that pork producers today are mandated to do trainings on and having audits on. And this really comes then from the packers, because the packers, be it Tyson or Hormel or Swift, Seaboard, Smithfield, for example, those are the majority of the packers here in Iowa. They probably consume 80% of the pigs that I just spoke about there with those packers. And the fact is that they ensure to their consumers that the pork that they harvest and process and sell is raised a certain way.
Right.
And so, yes, there is legislation that goes on the farm. I think it's still currently in some legal battle, which was called the Ag Gag Law.
Ag Gag.
And
right.
we've changed that over the couple years. Some of that was thrown out by the courts years ago, and so then we go back and retool.
Right.
And how we can give farmers protection. And there was a farmer, there's a couple farmers in the legislature that had these activists go to their pig farms and try to manufacture some sort of nefarious
Happens
acts.
all the time.
Yes.
Happens all the time.
And so, you know,
there's a lot of dishonesty going on their side.
Yeah, and so, you know, once again, we're trying to do things the right way, and as society deems changes be made, we continue at the organization level, the Iowa Pork, just like all the state organizations. We have standards by the National Pork Producers Council and the National Pork Board that we're going to raise things in a certain manner. And it's a lot different than, as we've said for a lot of years, raising pigs today is a lot different than what our grandfather did.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But we're ensuring to the consumer out there with your question that we're doing things in a safe way. And but ultimately, cats and dogs are companion animals, or cattle, horses, or cattle and hogs, and dairy and poultry. They're not companion animals. They're food production animals. So that's what we continue to provide to the consumer at an affordable price.
Yeah. Guys, you talk about of course, I live in the past. Years ago, I'd be on the farm with farmers, and they'd go out to the hog barn, which was a little red building, of course, that used to have horses in it. But every morning, the sow would have rolled over on a couple of her baby pigs. Well, the farmer looked at that as lost revenue.
Yeah.
And I've seen more than one sow take a beating, but I don't know if that's animal abuse or not, or a normal human reaction. But we have these crates now to prevent that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, and it's to somebody in California who doesn't know anything about hogs at all, maybe that looks cruel to have a pig sitting in a crate. But I'll tell you, the offspring of that sow are grateful because they're not being smothered by their mother.
Yeah, it's interesting. So technology has come into all facets of our lives, and it really has in the pork industry over the last 40 years. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we're trying to do things more humanely to, number one, the little pigs that are born, that they can be survivable pigs. Mm-hmm. That's what we talk about. And as you mentioned that about, you know, the mother sow laying on the pigs, some of the legislation out there for group housing or even larger pen size for farrowing, Proposition 12 in California right now is being litigated. And National Pork is involved in that because the voters of California had voted years ago that only meat raised in certain growing conditions could be sold in California. Right. Which pretty much said if you're raising pigs in Iowa or Nebraska or Illinois and you don't meet the standards of what the Californians voted for in Prop 12, then you can't sell meat there. And so that legislation or that litigation continues to go on right now.
So what kind of treatment do they want for hogs? Do they want round-the-clock waiters and butlers or what? I mean,
larger pen spaces.
Larger pen space.
Yeah, and so if you have a pen, if you have a barn, a traditional finishing barn might be 45 feet wide by 300 feet long, and that might house 1,250 head of pigs. Some of this propositions, they want to double the space for the animal, which means you still have the same size of building, but you only put half as many animals in it. And as everybody knows, in today's costs, doesn't matter when lumber was selling for a third the price it is today, or concrete was selling 20 years ago for half the price it is today.
Concrete's kind of expensive.
Oh, absolutely. So anyway, that's all part of what we have to deal with in our modern ways that we raise livestock.
Well, it seems overwhelming at times, doesn't it? All this nonsense. Not for you. You seem to enjoy it, but just all this nonsense. You know, it's held at the mercy of a foreign power for your export.
Yeah.
And here in this country, you got to fight some kid who doesn't know anything.
Well,
really,
we
he
haven't.
doesn't know anything about it at all.
Yeah,
He's woke. That's all he
there
knows.
you go. And with our time here today, you know, we haven't even touched the issue of climate change and the issues that we're dealing with in agriculture on that. We haven't even touched the issues of labor. And believe me, those impacts.
Are you still looking for open borders down there, you guys?
Isn't that something? There is some good legislation going on for the H-2A workers. But
why don't you move to Mexico? How's that?
Oh my gosh. Lack of water, lack of gravy down there.
Lack of water. Well, that's the lament I hear from a lot of pork producers. You can't get guys to work for, and I know you pay your guys well. You know, I've talked to your guys.
Yeah.
But some pork producers, you know, the only expense you have control over, large expense, is labor.
Yep.
So they really demand and put pressure on their legislators to allow more immigrants to the country into north central and northwest Iowa.
Well, and the dairy industry is going more robotics.
Yeah. Yeah. It has been for years.
Milking dairy cows. The cows walk in. They come into the parlor. Different types of ways, and it's all robotic.
Mm-hmm.
And there's very few people that even work in some of those dairy operations with thousands of dairy cows. But with pig industry, as I've stated in this station before, in the farrowing barns where the mothers are having little pigs,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of women work in those areas because they're wonderful nurturers and trying to keep the pigs going and keep the pigs alive and get them out the door and provide food to people is what we're after.
That's been, you know, men and women working together is a long-term thing in Iowa. Thank you, Greg. Some of those old hog ladies, I remember, they were pretty tough cookies.
All right. We'll see you next week, hopefully.
As I say, man, you're a tremendous community resource. I mean that.
Well, it's good.
Try to get on the air.
Good to see you.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Any questions I asked that bothered you or not?
Oh, no, you don't bother me.
Okay, that's fine.
They're all
Good.
relevant.
I'm good. I'm good.
They're all relevant. Take care.
All right. Yes, you would.